everyone. Today we're going to be reading the book Monsters University Teaming Up. When Mike Wazinski was a young monster, his class visited Monsters Inc., where the top scarers in Monstropolis worked. These monsters went through special doors into the human world to collect screams for human children. Then the screams were changed into energy for the town. During the trip, Mike snuck through an open door and watched as a scarer made children scream. That's when Mike decided he wanted to be a scarer when he grew up. Mike worked hard until he was accepted into Monsters University. On the first day of college, Mike's bus pulled up in front of the gates of a beautiful old campus. Wow, Mike breathed. He checked out the clubs and something called the Scare Games, a contest in which students competed to see who was the scariest. On the first day of class, Mike went to Scaring 101. Who can tell me the principles of an effective roar? Professor Knight asked. Mike started to answer, but then, roar! Another monster surprised everyone. The monster who roared was named James P. Sullivan. His friends called him Sully. Scaring games came so easily to him, so he never studied. He was only interested in having fun and goofing off. His grades showed it. Mike, on the other hand, studied every night. He read every book on the scaring and practiced his scaring techniques. He didn't want to fail his final exam. If he did, he'd be kicked out of the scaring program. On the day of the scaring final, Mike and Sully began to argue. They got into a roaring face-off, and everyone was watching, including the head of the school of scaring, Dean Hardscramble. Sully accidentally knocked over a screaming can. It held, breaking scream Dean Hardscramble had collected in her scaring days. The canister hit the floor and Hardscramble's scream was gone. I'm so sorry, cried Mike. It was an accident, Sully insisted. Dean Hardscramble proceeded to give Mike and Sully their final exams, and she was not impressed. She decided neither of them would be continuing in the scaring program. Sully was speechless and stormed out of the room. Hardscramble turned to Mike. Mr. Wazinski, what you lack is something that can't be taught. You are not scary. And Mike was crushed. The next semester, Mike and Sully were put in Scream Can design program. They were miserable until Mike remembered the scare games. Dean Hardscramble made a deal with Mike. If you win, I'll let you enter into the scaring program. But if you lose, you will leave Monsters University. All he had to do was find a fraternity to join so he could compete. There was only one option, Oozma Kappa, a group of misfits who weren't exactly scary. The problem was Oopma Cosma needed one more member. The star player had just arrived, Sully told Mike. Mike was not happy, but he had no choice. He and Sully moved into Oozma Kappa house and met Don, Art, Squishy, Terry, and Terry. In the opening event of the Scare Games, the first team to make it through the tunnel of stinging glow urchins would win. The last would be out. Mike and Sully tried for a second, but they left the rest of the team behind. Oozma Kappa came in last. Luckily, another team was disqualified. Oozma Kappa was still in the games. Oozma Kappa made it through the next challenge too, but everyone except Mike and Sully wanted to quit. We're built for other things, Don explained. So Mike decided to take the gang on a field trip to Monsters Inc. While they were there, Mike realized something. There was not no one type of scarer. The best scarers used their differences to their advantage. Mike and Sully admitted they'd be acting like jerks. We could be a great team, Mike said. We just need to start working together. The next morning, Sully felt inspired. They woke up bright and early and leaped out of bed. They trained the OKs in everything they would need to know for the next two events: how to scare kids, how to avoid teenagers, how to hide, and even how to do scary feet drills to make sure everyone was in tip top condition. Uzma Kappa was even more determined to win. They made it through the don't scare the teen and hide and sneak events. They were a team, and even better, they were all friends. That night, Sully ran into Dean Hardscramble. Tomorrow, you must prove you are undeniably scary. And I know for a fact that one of you is not. Sully knew she was talking about Mike. Mike was smart, talented, and the hardest working monster he had ever met. But he was also small, friendly, and not exactly scary. Sully was worried. He wanted his team to win, and the next day was the final Scare Games event. The big day arrived. There were two fraternities left: Roar Omega Roar and Oozma Kappa. The monsters had to scare a robot child. One by one, the members of both teams faced off. In the end, it came down to Mike. Roar. He got a perfect score. Uzma Kappa had won the scare games. But Mike soon discovered that Sully had cheated. He changed the settings to easy during Mike's turn. You don't think I'm scary? What was I supposed to do? Let the whole team fail? Sully replied. Mike wanted to prove he was scary. He snuck through a door into the human world and ended up in a camp cabin filled with dangerous children. They didn't think he was scary either. Sully snuck through the door to get his friend back, but Mike wanted Sully to leave after what happened. Mike didn't think he was special. I try to give people what they want, but all I do is let them down. Sully told Mike, "You're not the only failure here." Mike was surprised, but just then the Rangers arrived. Mike, Sully, knew they needed to get back to the monster world. To open the door, Sully had to scare the Rangers enough to power the door. When Mike and Sully made it back to Monsters University, they were kicked out of school. They hugged the OKs goodbye and left for their next big adventure together in the mailroom at Monsters Inc.